Hi, Alan. Thank you very much for joining me in this conversation. As I mentioned to you, we're gonna start putting these little videos up on social media just to get some thought and stimulation going for people that might be interested in coaching, that might wanna reach out to us, or even just post a comment or a question on what we
Mm.
discuss, and we'll be happy to interact with them. And as
Okay.
I mean, as
Looking
I
good.
mentioned, yeah, sorry, as I mentioned to you today, um, let's have a chat about the coaching that we specialize in, that's supported by the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, and which is basically the results coaching system, which is the neuroscience-based system that we use of setting goals, setting strategies and milestones, and habit-forming actions, and versus some of the coaches that are out there. And look, I and the, I want to say that the coaches, the process coaches, have a purpose once your mindset is right. But what it basically is the results, the neuroscience based coaching that we apply, which is more mindset based, versus the process based coaches that is out there, and what your thoughts are around that.
Okay. Well, I think the initial sort of thought, CD, and it's really, I must just say thank you for the opportunity to spend some time talking through this with you. My initial thoughts on this really um, is I think that a lot of the stuff that has been done over the years, including process coaching and other imperatives where human development is the center piece for what you're wanting to get going, is based on some of the older theories. So if you look at Freud, if you look at Kurt Lewin and the Gestalt theories, and even Abraham Maslow. So those theories were all really the the formulation of motivation. So it questioned, so it looked at personality and that kind of stuff, but it also looked at, so what was the source of human motivation. And what I like about focusing on the neuroscience side of it, it looks at motivation from a more physiological point of view. So it's kind of saying, all right, it's the brain that we're looking at. And because we've had a lot of research recently around how the brain works, I think it's giving a lot of answers in terms of the way what the response humans will have to certain things, which it doesn't defy the other theories of the past, but I think what it does, it gives us a new spin on it, and I think that's what makes a difference in terms of applying these a methodology which is brain based.
Okay, and for me, it's true what you said there, and on the one side, you're taking something that is an assumption that's made by somebody else,
Yes,
versus whereas us as coaches, we work on what is actually going on in that person's mind at that very point in time, right?
yes,
And we've
yes,
got the tools also to connect what basically that person's personality type is through the scarf assessment and what the emotional
yes,
triggers are, and then
yes,
connecting that to what they would actually like to do, and then helping
yes,
them manage that thought process. And I
yes,
guess I guess if my what I always rate part of my success as a coach is what effect I have on somebody's mindset and how they
mm,
see their own selves and their ability
yes,
to reach what they want to reach.
yes,
I think sometimes I like setting dynamic goals for people, that is
yes,
not only almost in the smart model, but also very personalized to them, so that that they can see that, and that
yes,
making that first link, um,
yes,
is sort of that start of forming that new neuroplasticity that
yes,
dominates the old way of thinking.
yes.
If that makes sense to you.
That makes total sense,
Yeah,
especially the idea of neuroplasticity,
yeah,
in that if you think of it, the research around that has been was actually a lot of it was based on OCD patients,
mm,
so people who were who were being treated for that, and basically they needed to look at behavioral change, and so one of the things that they acknowledged is that neuroplasticity would play a part of this. So the ability for the brain to actually restore itself with new and inventive ways of doing things has been the success of treating OCD patients. So that I think has a lot to say in terms of how you would go about helping people to embrace different things or new behaviors. The other thing I can say about this is that one of, and you mentioned it now, is that one of the things that we need to acknowledge is that we are literally making momentarily choice by choice by choice. It is micro as that. So if you have a look at being with somebody and having a coaching conversation, or even just a conversation to solve a problem, is that their choices are changing as we speak to that person. And I find that incredibly, it can be challenging,
Mm.
but it can be very opportunistic in terms of getting to that moment when the person that you're working with makes a choice that is going to work for them.
Yeah, and that is achieved by, like we say, creating that towards state of mind. And to put it in layman's
Yes.
terms, it is having somebody sit down and clearing the space, calming down
Mm.
the emotional brain, the flight or freeze brain,
Yes.
and creating such a comfortable space with that person that they can think very clearly, much like you and I have had over many years.
Yes.
But that they can think clearly about what their current reality is, and be sort of mindful and aware
Yes.
of their thoughts. And one of the things I always see in a lot of my coachees is when you've got that clear space, they're away from the daily noise and everything like that, and they actually notice their
Yeah.
go-to sort of bias or go-to reaction of, no, but
Yes.
if I have to restart a career, I have to start from the bottom. And my next
Yeah.
question to that is always, can you factually prove that? You know, is
Yes.
that set in stone, or is that just a thought that you had? And the
Yeah.
the the realization or the insight that people have then is
Yes.
incredible, because, and that's what I mean by
Yes.
that change of mindset, because
Yeah.
you can't have a process in place to do anything
Yeah.
if you don't have the right mindset. And we live
Yeah.
in this world right now that is amazing, and a lot of people that I coach right now would hear me say this, but we work on the person's agenda, and that person or that client or the coachee, um, sometimes in the beginning they don't quite understand what that means, right? Because we live in a world where information is on our fingertips. I mean, we can go
Yeah.
out now and do a course online for basically anything that we desire that's close to
Yes.
our passion. But if we don't have the and I'm not talking about motivation, because motivation is fleeting, but if we don't have the
Mm.
habit or the discipline or the take the responsibility to do that, that empowerment will never come into your space, and you will keep on treading water in terms of just doing another course, thinking about another thing. Whereas there's a difference between um, doing that and that process, and doing that through creating the right mindset and being towards it
Yes.
and consistently moving closer to it.
Yeah.
And I guess
Yes.
I guess also with the process we follow, it just breaks it down into smaller, more manageable chunks, and it
Yeah.
makes it a lot more real. And that's what I
Yes.
found in my own personal experience as well, is that once I sit in the coaching context, and whether I coach myself or I sit with my business coaches or I sit with
Mm.
somebody like you, just slowing down, being in the moment, being mindful of what your thoughts are,
Yeah.
and just actually thinking about what the next step is
Yes.
incredibly powerful. And,
Yes.
and and it sort of changes the whole idea of reaching your goals versus
Yes.
this thought that always is rumbling in the back of your head of, I'd wish I
Yeah.
could do this, or I like to do that, and I'm not really connected to my true self. And I think in the normal society where it's almost finish school, go to university, marry your
Mm.
sweetheart, have two kids, get a steady job. We don't live in that world anymore. But I
No.
think a lot of sort of like the traditional midlife crises and so on comes just exactly from that. Is that suddenly people realize that but this is I followed this societal train of thought, which is
Yeah.
important, but it
Yes.
shouldn't be the dominant factor in what you do. The dominant factor should be what you would like to do, and that's
Yeah.
what coaching brings out in people. And I think
Yes.
that's fundamentally different. And I find it. I don't. I think once people understand that is the result and the outcome
Yeah. Yeah.
versus. I'll use the example. Today I had a locksmith come in and change the locks on my door because
Yeah.
the tube fell out. But there's a transaction there that's actually got a physical result. Whereas
Yes.
where sometimes people's engagement with coaching takes a little while to form because
Yeah.
they it's not a physical transaction. It's an emotional transaction. It's a mindful transaction, and and
Yes.
and it's almost like it's hard to connect a value of a
Mm.
change of career, clarity on what your business should be, having work-life balance to save your relationship. It's hard to connect a monetary value to that, and people,
Yes.
that's where the hesitation I think sometimes comes in, and what the understanding
Yes.
is of what we actually do. You know?
Yes. So, and this example, as you were talking, it got me to think about there are the major differences between just being process driven and to be change driven. And I always call it, transactional in the first instance, which is the example of coming to change the locks or going to the postnet and going to just, do a transaction there and courier in something to somebody is a transaction and it just gets movement. All it gets is something happening. It's a change of physical state. However, it doesn't focus enough. There's no emotion attached to that. There might be some internal factor that makes you feel happy if you receive a gift or you send a gift. However, the transformational coaching is more around ensuring that people can ensure that change actually happens, meaningful change happens.
Yeah.
And therefore, you can't ignore things like their emotional responses and their memories and their experiences and the fact that within all of the realms of that, there are things that come up that they never knew before. So it's brand new, it's novice. And therefore, that thing that they come up with is that one thing that they didn't know about that makes all the difference for that person. And unfortunately, you actually can't do that when it's just a simple transaction.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's right. I mean, and then I don't want to make this talk for too long because I want to keep people's
Yeah.
attention drawn, and I want to make sure
Yes.
that the next chapter we have people are engaged. And I'd like to
Yes.
actually ask people that are watching this to comment
Yeah.
on where we are, and maybe they'd like to us to discuss the subject. But but
Yes.
I think to your point then that whole novice thing, and I think this is
Yes.
where we're going to close off. Um, what I know now that I didn't know before, which is true
Mm.
for me now, is that your brain has almost got an automatic defense against that. Because
Yes.
of the amount of
Exactly.
energy that it takes in the prefrontal cortex and your executive
Yeah.
decision making process to commit to that thought and to that
Mm.
process and to shift
Yeah.
yourself from that comfort zone that you have, which sits in your subconscious.
Mm.
So your brain automatically builds these set of limiting thoughts, and
Yes.
what your brain actually is is not something that controls you. You can actually control your brain by just switching into those new habits. And I think
Correct.
fundamentally, if you can make that switch, and it's not always easy to do it by yourself. Some people are very successful in doing it, but
Yes.
sometimes, and that's why I say everybody deserves a coach. Sometimes
Yes.
you just need to partner up with somebody that's going to just narrow it down, work with you, and it works in any kind of space. It works in so many spaces,
Yeah.
and that's important to know. But thank you, Alan.
Okay.
That was
Yeah.
a great conversation.
Correct.
Anything to close
And
with?
yeah, the only thing I'd like to close with is that I think that it is something that we could probably pick up in another conversation because you've already ushered it in, if I can
Yeah.
say that, is that we need to acknowledge the role of fear and uncertainty in the whole idea of change, and that includes personal change. And so maybe that would be a good subject to talk about next time, is how that plays a role and how it can be countered to turn it into the experience that people would like, or positive experience so to speak.
Exactly, and what a time for it, right? So what a time
Yeah,
for it. Fear
yeah,
and uncertainty. Anyway, thank
yeah.
you very much, Alan. To everybody out there, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for spending the time. I hope we stimulated some thought. Please reach out to me and Alan if you'd like to continue this conversation on a one-to-one basis, and we're happy to help. This it's a great time to be in the helping industry, and thank you, Alan, for your time. Have a great day. For the rest of the day.
And thank you to you, CD.